Thank you. Fishing, blah, blah, blah. The fact that he wanted to do it with the U.S. side. Mishpacha is Zuchur. Jay Weiss. He had your site today, and that was his. While the crew gathers, I'll start learning sponsorships. Year of Learning, friends and family of Sigi Bessler, Shalom Shraga Ben Dov, friends of Marvin Weinstein, Mordechai Ozer Ben Yisrael Aharon, Sarah Alpert, in memory of her husband, Harav Tzvi Likla Ben Hillel, Bella and David Adler, in memory of her father, Ayal Ben Yosef Cohen, friends of Hani Chaifetz, Kana Shoshana Bat Yosef, friends of Jack Prince, Yaakov Yitzchak Ben Shmuel Dov, friends of Sandy Davidoff, Shulamit Bat Chaim Eliyahu, friends of Judy Cohen, Yehudit Reba Moshe, friends of Dr. Annette Safransky, Chana Bat Ephraim Fischel, Gail and Leslie Kaplan, in memory of their parents, Mushka Sprinza Bat Yosef Chaim Bachava, Chanan Ben Moshe Eliezer Vachana, Pesha Bat Shmuel Yitzchak Halevi V'Tzipora, Isra Ben Yoel Moshe Cohen Vachana, friends of Linda Katz, Hinda Bat Yeshua, Lee and Harvey Greenberg, in memory of their parents, Esther Bat Eliezer, Yaakov Yosef Ben Abraham, Sarah Rivka Bat Baruch Yehuda, Batzal Ben Abraham Alevi, friends of Rochelle Ebner, Rachel Bat Moshe, Ike and Evelyn Blachor, in memory of his sister, Dr. Phyllis Pacheco, Livsha Bat Isser, a month of learning by Judy Schiff, in memory of her husband, Yaakov Ben Eliyahu Halevi, David and Henna Grunblatt, in memory of his father, Rav Avram Yosef Ben Yitzchak Meir Halevi, Marsha Federbush, in memory of her father, Menachem Mendel Ben Shlomo, Ruvain and Susan Podolsky, in memory of his mother, Fredel Bat Shraga Feivel. Today we have a day of learning by Ernie Bloom, in memory of his father-in-law, Yaakov Ben Mordechai. May the Neshamas have an aliyah, Kranker Rafia, Velti Yashir, Hashem Atliah, and Chol B'nai Yisrael, good B'nai Ben Shriah. And we wish everyone a freilich and a happy Hanukkah, and our prayers as well for that joyous Hanukkah with the release of many of the Chatufim. That we see a joyous, we should see, no, we should see a joyous Hanukkah, okay, with the release of, so that's why I'm hopeful that before the end of Hanukkah, maybe we would see something. I don't have any special information, unfortunately. That we're going to see. I get the mail. I get information from Israel, and the Tutsis are going to get a few more, given the last ballistic missile that they said the Houthis. Right. Okay, gentlemen, even though the Gemara does not look long this morning, that doesn't mean it's not complicated. Okay, so we're going to get started in a moment. I just want to do a quick review, and then we'll go into today's stuff, which is TIP. Okay, I have almost as much notes as I do the Gemara itself this morning. Okay. All right, we saw on the bottom of the previous Amud, Chet Amud Bet, all right? All right? Beplugta de Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda v'Rabbanan. The Tanya Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda, that Rabbi Yossi taught Chaver ein sarich hatra'ah. And the implication was if the woman was a Chaverah, okay, in some way, okay, all right, she did not need a warning. Right, that was an alternative explanation to what we saw previously. Okay? Lefi shelo nitna hatra'a ela lahavchin ben shogeg lemezid. Okay, that the reason that a warning is given, at least suggested here, is to distinction between an active shogeg and an active mezid. So I'm going to pick up there with Rav Ash, and then we'll go into our, which we covered a little bit yesterday. Okay. Right. Okay. All right. So Mel is here, right?
Sorry, his bag is here. So
Yeah. Okay. Maybe he had to go to the restroom. Okay. Okay. So I just want to, as I said, point out that we're going to continue part of this same issue. All right. Well, what kind of hatra'ah? Remember, we saw already an example that there was a machloket as to whether the hatra'ah had to include not just, okay, not just that it's done by the Beis Din, etc., okay, but that there was a view by Rabbi Yehuda, I believe, that said that it had to be the specific kind of punishment, okay, applicable to that act. From, well, okay, well, but
in order to punish someone,
it had to be, the Adim had to give a specific kind of warning. Okay, right?
obviously, if they are giving a warning, you're seeing the action or whatever it is, and therefore they automatically.
And tell him, and according to Rabbi Yehuda, don't do such and such because you will, because we're warning you, you will get such and such a punishment from the base. Okay. Well, that's what that may come up further in the Gemara. Okay, it's a good comment, but the Gemara may bring that up as a potential challenge to the Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, because we were concerned that it could be that Rabbi Meir held like Rabbi Yehuda in this case. Okay? So what happens? Okay, so on the bottom of Chet Amud Bet, the last line, Rav Ashi Amar, Kagon de Atru Bei Malkot, Velo Atru Bei Tala. Okay, that his answer, his suggestion is that they warned in regards to stripes or malchus, and not in regards to the death penalty. Okay. Okay. So it would appear then that Rabbi Meir holds that in our case, for a moment, that the defamer needed to be judged by three, as a court of three can administer malchut. That's the point that we're trying to understand. Ukemiflage, and we see an argument about this, but plukted the Rabbi Yishmael the Rabbanan, and there's an argument between Rabbi Yishmael and the Rabbi. Ditznan, okay, makot b'shlosha, that one is able to give makot or malkot with three, on a court of three, mishum Rabbi Yishmael, and therefore that's what we're saying. It may appear in these situations that Rabbi Meir holds that in our example of the husband, okay, and the woman, right, in that kind of situation, right, that the result would be that a court of three can apply and administer it to the situation. Okay, that he would be made holds like Rabbi Shmuel there. Okay, Umishum Rabbi Yishmael Amru be'asrim u'shlosha. Okay, but clearly they said that ordinarily it had to be done in a court of 23. Okay, right? So what's going to happen? Ravina is going to come forward and try to give a different explanation. Ravina Amar, Kegon shenimtza echad min ha'edim, karov o psul. Okay, it's a situation where what happens if one of the witnesses is found to be either a relative or an invalid. Okay, so in other words, if you were to have three people, okay, in a situation, and our case was such that you could still have theoretically two valid witnesses, because if one of them is either a relative to one of the other witnesses or a relative to one of the litigants, that removes them from the status of being an eligible witness. Okay. But if you have the three, you still could have one other person join with the third party. Okay. All right. And that would remain valid witnesses. Okay. So what happens? Ukamiflage beplugta the Rabbi Yossi v'Rebbe, and they could be involved then in a machloket that is reflected in an argument between Rabbi Yossi and the Rebbe, Rabbi Yehuda Hana, aliba the Rabbi Akiva, based on a view of Rabbi Akiva. So now the Gemara is going to go and discuss for us in more detail what is this view of Rabbi Akiva, and then how was it that Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi disagreed on this view. Okay, so we go on. Ditznan is taught in the Mishnah. Okay, Rabbi Akiva Omer says as follows: Lo bashlishi. If it's three people coming as witnesses, and what about the status of the third person? Okay, El lahachmir alav. Okay, in other words, he comes to bring a sense of stringency. Okay, or a more solid, if you will, testimony. What happens there? Lachmir la'asod dino kiyotzei ba'elu, to follow up and carry out the court case as was presented by the following. In other words, in whatever the case is flowing. Im kain onish hakatuv. Okay. Therefore, whatever punishment is written, et hanitafel, to the third person who is associated, le'ovrei avera, ovrei avera. Okay, so that if that's the case, the third person, okay, would be punished just as if they were found to be a dim zomamim. Okay, they would be punished. That third person, okay, isn't just not, so to speak, a schlep along. Okay, to add to the testimony or strengthen their testimony, he would be considered just as guilty if they are found, okay, to be inappropriate, ineligible witnesses. Alechat kama v'kama, okay, how much more so? Sheyishilem schar et hanitafel la'oseh mitzvah ke'oseh mitzvah. How much more so then if when this third person comes to give additional testimony or strengthen some testimony, if it is beneficial to the case in some way, and it adds to a proper judgment, then the person has done a mitzvah by coming and fulfilling that example. Umash nayim nimtza echad mehem karov o pasul. And whereas when there are his example of only two witnesses, one of them is discovered to be either a relative or ineligible for whatever reason. Okay. Hold on a second. Okay, what happens then? Edutan betela. Okay, otherwise their testimony is invalid. Af shlosha, even with three, nimtza echad mehen karov o pasul, edotan betela, asks the Gemara. If we're going to say if you have three, okay, and even one, if we say with two, one of them is not a valid witness, why don't we say the same thing with regards to three individuals? Okay, uminayin she'afilu me'ah. And how do we know that that wouldn't be the case with even a multitude of witnesses coming? Talmud Lomar. Why? Because the pasuk says edim. All right, that would be the case. Now we're going to see what's the argument, right? So that's why we get even multiple witnesses. You might raise the question if one of them renders, if normally two and one is not valid, it's not the question of the number of witnesses, it's the fact that they don't satisfy the legal requirement of being a valid witness. That's the point. Okay? Yes, Ted. So if you had 10 witnesses, so the Gemara basically seems to be asking this question. If normally when you have only 2 witnesses, which is, let's say for the moment, a valid testimony, right? And one of them is found ineligible, that renders that testimony null and void. So what about if you have 10 witnesses, is your question? So you're going to have this disagreement of, can you say, well, that only renders that one person no good, but they can join with somebody else. That's the whole point. So we're seeing that there are 2 different opinions, is what the Gemara is asking. Do you say it nullifies the entire testimony? Or does it say, no, it only knocks out that particular individual, and the one who came, okay, can be connected with somebody else? We've got to see that the Gemara is going to have to deal with that because it's a question, right? So therefore we have this machloket now between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. And that's what the Gemara is going to continue with. Amar Rabbi Yossi, B'med Dvarim Amurim, what are we talking about? B'dinei nefashot. So Rabbi Yossi is saying this only applies in capital cases, right? Ava b'dinei mamonot, but if we're dealing with simply, so to speak, criminal cases, all right, what happens? Titkayem edut b'sha'ar, that the testimony continue with the others, with whatever other, right?
Monetary law.
Okay, with regards to monetary law. So Rabbi Yossi is making a difference between dinei nefashot, dinei mamonot, whether once you remove an individual, okay, can the remaining other individual be reconnected with any other witness, right? However, what happens? Rebbe Omer, says Rebbe, Echad dinei mamonot, ve'echad dinei nefashot. The same law applies to criminal cases or monetary cases as it does to capital cases. By the way, there is a 3-way machloket on this particular section of the Gemara. The simplest understanding is that of Rashi, that says, okay, that the testimony would be valid if warned to the defendant. Okay, Tosafot disagree with Rashi and says the witnesses are valid only if they were forewarned by the court to testify truthfully. And the Meiri has another whole different opinion as well, which we won't go into now. So the Gemara asks now this machloket between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, ve'ematai, okay, under what circumstances do we say this applies? Bizman shehetru bahem, okay, the time that they were warned. So that's why there's this machloket. Rashi is basically saying that the witnesses have to warn the individual, which is the basic shot. On the other hand, Tosfot argues, no, it's the court that has to warn the witnesses how they're supposed regarding their testimony. Okay, all right. Aval bizman shelo hitru bahem. Okay, but if they did not warn them appropriately, depending upon whose shita you're going to follow, whether let's just follow Rashi for the moment, then if they didn't warn them appropriately, okay, warn the individual, then it doesn't apply. That would seem to be the case, right? Okay, let's go on to the top of the Amud now. So the Gemara challenges this view. Okay, can you really say that their testimony would not be applicable. How can we say that? So Maya Asu, what would be the case then if you have a situation where you do have three witnesses, as perhaps in our example of the defamer, okay? But we'll go into that more in detail in a moment. And two out of the three witnesses are brothers, and the third is somebody else, okay? Shera'u be'echad sheharaget hanefesh. In particular, we say, what about a situation that three witnesses saw Moshe kill Shimon, okay? But two of the witnesses, two of those two witnesses are brothers, okay? So we have here a situation where if we say that the two brothers are invalid witnesses because they're relatives, right? And therefore you don't have valid testimony, okay? All you have is to accept that one, okay? Then that one would need to be able to join with somebody else in order to have any valid testimony to make a conviction in that case, okay? If we apply this to our case of the defaming the betrothed woman suspected of adultery, the one brother and the other could be valid witnesses, could be combined, and then according to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, because of that, you would absolutely need the court of 23 to conduct the case. Okay? If, however, all right, you say that the two brothers are invalid, okay, and you wipe them out, then what happens? You only have one witness. And so therefore, it's no longer a capital case. It's only a case of Dinei Mamonot, where the father of the woman is claiming against the statement of the defaming husband. Then, according to Rabbi Yossi, it could be conducted under a court of three, okay? Because it's only a case not only of Mamonot, but also from before that he holds, like we saw Rabbi Yishmael, that he could do Malkot with a court of three. Okay? So it's a bit complicated, but that's the situation, right? Okay, V'ibayis Ema. And now what happens? Let's give a different explanation slightly to our situation. Kigon shehetru ba'acherim v'lo hitru ba'edim. If we're going to take Rashi's pshat from before and Rashi says it's got to be the witnesses that warn the individual, but in this case, it was somebody else who warned, okay, and not the witnesses themselves. It comes back now to another argument, okay, between Rabbi Yossi and the rabbis, based again on the following Mishnah. Ditznan Rabbi Yossi Omer, he says, Le'olam eino neharag ad shayu pi shnei edim matrin bo. Okay, you do not have, says Rabbi Yossi, a situation where the person cannot be put to death unless that is the witnesses themselves that made the warning to the individual. Okay? Right? Right? Shenamar, why? Because Rabbi Yossi bases it on the pasuk, al pishnayim edim, by the mouth of two witnesses. So in other words, it's their warning that must come aside from the testimony. Okay? So it's both warning and testimony. Okay? In that case, so it's possible that here too, Rabbi Meir may agree with Rabbi Yossi, and therefore only based on this require a based in of three to do the case. Okay? However, v'ibayat ema, if you want, I could say as follows: Kigon de itkachush b'bdikot v'lo itkachush b'chakirot. Perhaps we have another possibility, suggests the Gemara, that there's a contradiction in the bidikot, and I'm going to explain that in a moment, okay, and no contradiction in the chakirot. Now, we know that there are two, I'm going to call it varieties of interrogation. I'll use that term, that are conducted in the particular case, right, for dinei nefashot. One is a bidika, okay, where we're looking at the general facts, minor detail, things like that. The other is chakira, where we see that there is a serious interrogation, focusing particularly on the time and the place of the incident, because these are primary aspects of testimony. Okay? So the question is, if there's a conflict on the bedika, on some minor details, that's less serious in a way. But there cannot be any conflict in regards to the chakira, the significant details and specifics involved with the case. Right? Ukemiflige, and we argue, and what's that argument? Beplugta de ben zakai v'rabanan. That it's based on an argument again between Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and the rabbis. Okay, what is it? Ditznan Maaseh ubadak ben Zakkai, and we have a situation when Ben Zakkai examined the case, ba'oktsei ta'enim, and he examined it to the detail as to the kind of stems that are on the figs. Okay? What did he do? He wanted to find out specific details and wanted to test the witnesses as to the level of specificity that they were able to define the particular case. Okay? Why is this important? Amar Rav Yosef. We're going to see he's going to give an example in just a second. Right? Okay. Says Rav Yosef. Hevi habal edim shazinta. We're back now. Rav Yosef is coming back to our case of the woman, okay, where the husband claimed that she was not a virgin at the kiddushin, and father claims she was, and that he's defaming her, so on. Okay, so what happens? Amar Rav Yosef, Hevi habal edim shazinta. The husband brought, or the man brought witnesses that she committed adultery. Vehevi ha'av edim vehizimun le'edei Baal. And the father brought witnesses who presented testimony that the husband's witnesses are edim zomamim, that they weren't there to be able to witness the adultery, or they were elsewhere, okay? Things like that.
Inspiring witnesses.
Okay? So what happens? Eidei habal nehergin, ve'ein mishalmin mamon. Okay? As is in the pasuk, all right? That you do to them what was intended for the punishment, and therefore these I'll call them conspiring or false witnesses of the husband are put to death, but they are not required to pay any money. Why? Because we kim lemi derabamine, exactly. Okay, because they get the, if you want to call it, stricter or higher punishment. Okay, that's precisely the case, right? However, the Gemara continues. Chazar vehevi habal edim. The husband comes back and brings another set of witnesses. Vehizimun le'edei ha'av. And he now challenges and presents testimony. They present, no, you guys can't say that Moshe and Freddie weren't there. because you were with us out in Philadelphia at the time. Whatever. Okay? All right? Wherever it was. A day now, notice the difference now. A day ha'av nehergin umishalmin mamon. These witnesses, okay, those of the father who have not been shown to be conspiratory, okay, or false, both must be killed and pay money. What is the difference here? The difference is primarily the fact, okay, that these are considered two separate situations, okay? And so for the question of Edim Zomamin, they're put to death. But for the other example, okay, right, they are held guilty, okay, and therefore must pay. Okay, mamon lazeh, says the Gemara, v'nafashot lazeh. Okay, money goes to this one, and so for one, it's a financial case, a monetary case, and therefore they would be held liable for that. And for the other, okay, it is a capital case, right? They are, all right. So we see there that, all right, there are two different classes of cases for two different people, and therefore it's considered two separate transgressions, and therefore there's both punishments. Okay? All right. Now Rav Yosef continues with the following. Va'amar Rav Yosef, says Rav Yosef, Ploni Rav O La'anso. Okay? An individual comes to the court, and his claim is that he's been sodomized, so and so sodomized him against his will. Okay? What happened? So the Gemara goes on and says, who? Ve'echad mitzarfin lahargo. That the person against whom the act was committed can join with one other person, okay, to make two valid witnesses, and therefore declare this a din nefashot, and therefore they can, as a result, bring testimony to result in the death of the one who committed the act of sodomy. Okay, so what happens? Mitzarfin lahargo. However, lirtzono, if it was done not so, if it was done willingly, in other words, if the person permitted. What? Maybe he was thinking he could get some money out of it. Who knows? Okay. All right. All right. What happens? What says the Gemara? Rashahu. How can you even suggest that, right, Heshi? He's a wicked person. All right? And we do have a pasuk in Shmot. Do not put your hand with a wicked person to be an unrighteous witness. Right? Al tashet resha aid. That's the pasuk. Okay, but Rava tells us as follows: Amar Adam karov eitzel atzmo, ve'ein Adam mesim atzmo rasha. Okay, that a person cannot make himself wicked by his own testimony. Okay, and it could be valid. He can give testimony, okay, against the sodomizer, but he cannot give testimony against himself. Okay. Now, furthermore, to finish up, Amar Rava, says Rava, on the top of Yud, Ploni, right? Amar Rava, Ploni el ishti, v'hu v'acher mitztarfin lahargo. Okay, that if we have a case where so and so comes and says that so and so committed adultery with my wife, and this other, the male, whatever, is able to testify along with me to bring valid testimony to produce a death penalty. Aval lo laharga, but not to convict her of adultery. My kamashmalan, what does it come to teach us? Demaflaginan bedibura, that we split, okay, in this case, okay, that the evidence, the testimony, hainu hach, okay, and that's the case, mahu detoma, all right, and that's where we're going to pick up tomorrow, because we're going to deal with the whole question of Pargina and Dibora. Can one split testimony and accept part of the testimony of one and part of the testimony of another in order to come to a valid testimony in general? Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. Everybody have a good Yom Tov, a good Hanukkah. Tomorrow is, as you can see, a pretty long piece. Okay. Tomorrow's Gemara is fairly long.
There's a built-in,
Yeah.
there's a built-in problem with Adam corroborates a lot. Right? Adam corroborates a lot. It's all about you just can't trust a person that it's something so close to them. So it's hard to understand that. But you trust one part, and somehow he's factually correct.
So you can imagine that there's going to be a machloket on whether that's whether that's viable. Right. You mentioned them. Right.
In it, I mentioned the sector.
Yeah. Good. Very good.
Then we have to put the serious
Not. I was. I have family and visiting, so I'm a little preoccupied.
You're gonna schedule a meeting.
Yeah. I'm just trying to look at what would be a good date and time. I'm thinking a week from today at like 4 o'clock. I have a eye doctor's appointment at I think at 2, so I should be done with that. Yeah.